You're listening to Gender, a Wider Lens.
I'm Stella O'Malley, a psychotherapist in Ireland.
And I'm Sasha Ayad, an adolescent therapist in the United States. Since 2016, my practice has been exclusively dedicated to gender questioning teens and families impacted by gender dysphoria.
I also work with gender questioning teenagers, and I facilitated support meetings for families and individuals who've been impacted by gender issues.
We're curious about the concept of gender and how it's unfolding in the wider culture.
Join us as we look at gender through a wider lens.
Hi Stella, how's it going?
Hello Sasha.
It's our last episode of the year, isn't it?
I know. And we have a lovely episode planned. I think people will really enjoy it. I actually like this time of the year because I think it's a space for reflection. And I think it's really an important space. And not only that, we've kind of exciting plans for 2022 with our podcast. I think the podcast, I feel since we hit a year, we suddenly kind of went into and we kind of almost expanded the concept. And this Pioneers series that is on the way is a kind of part of our expansion. I think it was your idea and it's such a good idea.
Yeah, I guess the thinking behind Pioneers series is that, we've kind of dove very deep into a lot of these contemporary issues around ROGD and internet use and all of this stuff. And I thought, gosh, it would be really nice to do a Pioneer series where we interview really experienced, important clinicians and researchers whose work have contributed like a foundational understanding to gender, sexuality, sexual orientation, identity, transgenderism, all of that stuff. So this is kind of like a back to basics 101 about gender and sexuality. And so I think this will be really good for us because it will help ground our future conversations in let's just kind of clear the noise and figure out what are the foundational pieces of information that everybody needs to know about gender and sexuality research and work, clinical work.
Yeah, because it's like gender was tucking along, whatever the word is, and it was tipping along, that's the phrase, and it was doing its own thing. It was a very small field of research. They all seemed to know each other, and they were doing their papers, and they were in their scene, and nobody else was talking about it. And It sounds like they were all talking to each other and writing journals and all that. And then suddenly it exploded and people like us suddenly got interested. And it's like, we're the newcomers to their old field. And it's like, we really need to explore what were they studying back in 1995? What were they studying? What were they studying way back in 1989 or in 2001? Because that is a huge amount of knowledge and it's not impacted by politics. This was when just researchers were researching and they were just doing their thing, and they had no idea they were about to get into the biggest issue in the world. They had no idea what they're just. And what's interesting, I think, with the pioneers, I've noticed them because obviously you and I have followed them and stuff, they feel very unaffected, it seems, by the politics because they were there first. So they're just going, I don't know what's happening out there, I'm just doing my work. And so there's a feeling of almost, they just think, right, well, that's out in that world. I'm just over here just doing the work that I've always done for the last 35 years.
Yeah, and I think some of the pioneers that we will talk to, they have known for a long time that this can be controversial work, but some of these individuals are real hardcore scientists and researchers, and they're like, I don't want to be swayed by the politics. I'm just here to study this topic. So they have a kind of backbone. Well, maybe we can talk about what the criteria were, because some of the people we interviewed are not pioneers in the sense that they were doing research in the 90s, but we kind of are broadening the definition a little bit. So I guess some of the things that were on my mind when we were putting together our list of interviewees were, first of all, people, like we said, whose research has been really foundational in our understanding of sex and gender. So these are people like Dr. Blanchard, Dr. Zucker, those kinds of guys.
The main
and
ones.
Then also there are clinicians who are newer to the game, who maybe picked up on the ROGD phenomenon and were calling it out for what it was.
Yeah. And then there'd be other people like, Paul Vassi, who had such a different field of study, but it's around, the Fa'afafine over in Samoa, where it's like, so when everybody talks about two-spirit and third gender and all that, and we think, God, where's this come from? It's like, well, this guy knows everything there is to know about the Fa'afafine and Samoa. And this adds to our understanding, because it's like, okay, so we thought we just discovered all this. No. There's
not new.
We're standing on the shoulders of giants. Like there's absolute masses of knowledge that really needs to be disseminated out into the public. And that's what we're trying to do here with this.
That's right. And some of the other people we're interviewing also perhaps caught on to the fact that medical intervention as a primary solution is not helpful. So there are some individuals we speak to who perhaps through their own work or their research proposed to include more psychological intervention rather than medical intervention for gender dysphoria. So these are some of the criteria in our mind. Now, we know that there are lots of very important contributors to our understanding of gender and sexuality that have not been interviewed. So we don't want to make it seem though these coming interviews are the comprehensive end all and be all of the only important people. But, we have contact with these particular individuals and we feel like their research has really helped us. And we are very, very excited to get these researchers and scientists on the show.
And like you say, we just picked a kind of, it's like moments, you know what I mean? Different people who would kind of represent different moments. Dr. Hakeem, and he ran the only really gender critical group for trans people. And he ran it for many years in London. And it had extraordinary results. And he has since written a book about it and things like that. But it feels like there's a lot of untapped knowledge. Right. And our big thing here is we're going to actually bring on the experts and
put them together in one place. We'll have a series of interviews. And I feel a little bit, maybe this is a bit superstitious, but I feel nervous lest we name someone who ends up not making the recording time or something like that. But, these are the people we have on our radar, and there will be a lot of surprises as well. So we hope everybody is excited and engaged with this series, which we're really thrilled to put together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about New Year's.
Well, do you take resolutions seriously? Do you tend to have one?
It's funny because I was thinking about this. I know that a lot of people they crap on New Year's resolutions, right? New Year's resolutions don't work. The research shows that nobody sticks with them. Like, I get all that. But I also think that the new year is this really important marker of what might offer a fresh start or an opportunity to build in a new habit or just to have some particular value or priority on your radar. So personally, I tend to be a little more general. So my New Year's ideas or goals are usually broad. And I have a couple things on my mind. What about you? Before we get into the details, are you like a big New Year's resolution person?
I am. Not resolution, but I am a very big New Year's, Christmas, end of the year. Are you happy with where life is going? New year, new start. What are you trying to do? Where are you sliding? Where are you slipping? Yeah. I have to say the last 2 years were so bizarre with COVID and all that. We really went into weird mental space. And more in a frightening way, I'm meeting an awful lot of people who've been really, I just had a conversation with an old friend today. And it's just like, wow, we'll be talking about the impact of this for some time. And I think I will be thinking a lot about how COVID has impacted. I've changed where I actually work is a completely different place now because I'm on Zoom all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really adapt my house to that, if you follow me, because I just slipped into it in March 20, started working in this corner that I'm sitting in, never worked here before. And I'm thinking, well, I'm actually in the middle of trying to win a war with my husband saying I should be in a different part of the house. We will see how. That might be one of my New Year's resolutions, to win that particular war. But actually, what I would like to do is the big learning you and I had when we went to New Orleans and we met in person, and it was just so extraordinary. By the way, for those listeners who haven't had the pleasure of meeting Sasha in person, there's a vitality and an energy, like an animal energy that I was like, oh, that's what I was like. And also the second revelation, just for anybody who's interested, is your son, as Sasha,
I'm blushing.
Are you? You ended up being such an extrovert. We'd walk down the street and she'd say, hello, how are you? To people who were walking by. And I'd be quite a friendly person, but you're everywhere we go, so tell me. And she started chatting with people. So it was, I thought I really knew you. We were meeting every week. We were chatting a lot on WhatsApp and stuff like that, more than we probably should be. And then I met you and I went, oh my God. Oh, okay. Whole new sides, whole new levels. And I thought, I'll never make that mistake again. I need to meet people in real life. I really do.
Yeah.
But that's my big resolution for is to prioritize meeting people. And I went to London last week on that basis, and it was a roaring success. I just wanted to meet a few people that I know and that knew me, and it was gorgeous.
Oh,
it was just gorgeous.
So good.
I put in a business meeting in there, and it really worked. And I thought, I've got to do it more. I've just got to do this.
Both of your resolutions are interesting because they hold opposite poles. You want to fix up your Zoom room so that your online work is better, and you want to see more people in person, which I actually think that's really cool because you're trying to make the most of both types of situations.
You're right. What about yours? Go on then, spill.
Okay, well, now that you're talking about New Orleans, I just want to say, I do talk to everybody. I can't stop talking. I ask everybody about, I'm probably so annoying. You either love it or hate it, I think.
And she gets into the Uber and, well, hello, as I'm looking out the window darkly.
But I have to say about New Orleans, when we got to the Airbnb, I looked over at Stella's bed where she had stuff laid out. We had nearly the exact same backpack.
Yeah.
We have the exact same phone case and the same laptop. Literally the same model of laptop. And I thought it was so weird. Obviously, we were meant to be friends.
Oh, we're so different. We're
we're very different people, but we had the same stuff, all the same stuff. So my New Year's resolution, 100% going to New Orleans was a revelation because, first of all, just spending time together was wonderful. Yeah. And also being in the real world for 6 solid days or whatever the amount of time was, chatting with normal people who know nothing about all of this radical extreme politics stuff was so delightful because, when you get into this work in the way that Stella and I are, we're far, far down a very unusual rabbit hole. And of course, we encounter people whose real lives are impacted by this stuff. So it's all real. But also, it's so important to keep in mind there's a humongous majority of the population that hasn't even had to approach this with any kind of inch of their daily life. So that was very, very nice. So, trying to do more things outside of work. We obviously work a lot. If people don't know, embarrassingly a lot. So really just trying to pull away. And then I guess on a more, personal level, I'm really, really happy right now with this particular kind of weightlifting program that I've been on since June. And it's been amazing because I had knee surgery in September last year. So it's been over a year. And really, until I started taking weightlifting very seriously, my knee hadn't improved much. So, it's really cool to see I'm going to get on like a weightlifting soapbox and then I promise I'll get off. But, if you...
This is taking a swerve.
Yes, this really has. But, if you think about all of the things in our life that we have no control over whatsoever, it's really comforting to me to have something within my control that just requires consistent, almost boring commitment. Like, I go to the gym, I do these lifts every day, I increase my weight ever so slightly every week. And 6 months later, you're like, wow, I have been able to triple the amount of weight that I can lift in this particular movement. And developing that kind of physical skill set over time and seeing yourself get stronger. It's just nice to have something that with the right kind of preparation and the right work, you actually can make serious improvements. And there's something to me that's really comforting about that, given how up in the air so much other stuff is in life.
Am I right in thinking that you think that can be quite helpful for somebody who's kind of at war with their body?
I think if it doesn't tip into vanity and aesthetic, then yes. So, I know, for example, that people who get into bodybuilding have a really high incidence of unhealthy eating patterns and disordered eating and a lot of like shame and self-criticism. So it can tip into that if you're not careful. But if you're looking at it more from the perspective of, I want to develop strength, or I want to develop this movement skill, and it's about that kind of development rather than pure aesthetic, then I think that is really valuable. And I think having a goal that you can work towards over time that is about a skill or a positive trait is very helpful. It's kind of like, even if someone were working on writing a book and every month you finished a chapter, like that's a kind of an accomplishment you can be proud of. So as long as it doesn't tip into really harsh self-criticism or an over focus on aesthetic, I think weight training can be really powerful for some people.
Yeah, I think with the right person, it could be really powerful.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So we have for our listeners, a list in no particular order of, 10 possible New Year's resolutions that are focused on mental health and overall well-being. And so I really am excited to share this list. People can, of course, pick and choose things that resonate with them. You can think about all 10. You can think about just one, or you can say no to all of them. But these are just kind of a list of priorities we thought might be cool to kind of roll out as possible New Year's resolutions.
Okay, will we go for the first one then?
Yes.
So it says, let me see, you read it out there, prioritizing self-care, is it?
Yeah, so this is kind of general and encompasses things like, eating properly, sleeping enough, watching your self-talk. And, this is just a general sense of, what am I doing to care for myself, to make sure that my well-being is a priority? And I think, especially for anybody out there who feels responsible for another person, obviously parents, but it could be others too. I know sometimes even detransitioners feel a great sense of responsibility to their online followers or whatever. And I would encourage people to think about how to balance in your own needs and prioritize yourself if you feel pulled in a million directions.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And the things like when you're prioritizing your self-care, remembering just the basics of sleep and food and your self-talk, all that sort of stuff, we forget about it when we're weak. And it's when we're weak that we most need it. And that's the great tragedy of life. And I know for myself, I've had a fairly difficult few months. Just since September, everything has been really quite complex and difficult for me. And I know I've slipped on everything there. I've slipped on everything,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
feeling it. And you know what? In a way, I would defend it. I had so much going on. I had so much kind of on my plate. I can see how I did slip. But now is the time for me to say, yeah, and, readjust that. These things happen.
Yeah.
It's just part of life. You slip off, you slip back on, you slip off, you slip back on. And I that's something I need to do for my own self.
Which of those would you say is kind of a priority for you?
Oh, for me, for the moment, is I always go for my walks. I've been going for my walks for so long, since COVID, really, and really religiously. And it's just slipped off really since September because of various reasons. And I just want to get back on. I miss them. I want to get it back. I know why I did fall off it, and it was fair enough. And I also know that I need to get back on it. And I'm looking forward to it. I'd love to I used to go for a walk with my friend really late at night, like 11 and 12. And I'm going to hassle Hannah to come back in my midnight walks because I loved them.
Wow, you're so cool. You take midnight walks?
Yeah.
Wow,
We live
okay.
near rural, so it's really beautiful. So you walk out
Yeah.
and you're in the kind of the countryside at night. It's lovely.
Weren't you doing like 100 days of walking or something?
Yeah.
I remember at some point you were posting regularly.
Yeah, Ciara Kelly's kind of a famous presenter in Ireland, and she pushes this 100 days of walking, and she pushes it on the 1st of January. And she got me into it 2 years ago, and I kept going. And then she got me into it again. So I think 3 years in a row I've been got into it. And then, like I say, I fell off that thing in September for various reasons and haven't got back on, and I'm getting back on. That's a biggie. So things like that, I would love if listeners said, yeah, actually, I've just done something similar. We do. And it's not about giving out about yourself. It's about noting it, taking opportunities like New Year to say, get that back in. Yeah.
Okay, so can you read the second one there?
Okay, hang on a second. It wasn't out. Learn about the many ways to communicate. This is a biggie. Verbal, non-verbal, listening, written, visual. A lot of people think that the only way to communicate is with words. Especially, I often feel people of this movement, we're all word mad. And I remember when I first became friendly with Angus, and he was like, all these essays, where's the visuals? Like, oh, Christ, it's all these really long, brilliant, wordy essays, and there was very little visual content. And I thought, he's right. He's actually right. It's a real distinct characteristic of this movement that we're wordy people. And it's no accident. It's a language movement, really. And I think people need to be aware that, especially, and I'm going to kind of generalise wildly, but especially for boys, not always, but sometimes you could argue that some boys might more communicate with physicality. So, let's say if you've got some people, and they mightn't communicate with words, but you could kind of put on the fire, or you could cook them their favourite dinner. You could kind of throw a kind of a nice soft rug on top of them. You can do little tending physical things. Or you can, run a bath and say, go on in and have the bath. Go on in and have ours. You can just do little things that are physical that can actually communicate plenty. And it's not, words don't always work as such,
Yeah, that's such a good point. So you're talking about not just communication in terms of like work and like the movement of trying to be more gender exploratory. You're talking also about even in personal relationships, like learning how to communicate your appreciation or love in other ways too.
And your tenderness and your value of them and I find one thing that you can really communicate and make it your business to communicate is your acknowledgement that they're having a very distressing time. And it's a kind of a tenderness that you can communicate. And that can be done with, I just thought, I know you love when I cook this. I just thought I'd... Just little things like that can be very, very loving, really.
Yeah, for sure. That's really nice. I love that. Okay. So number 3 is invest in quality relationships in real life and in online connections. So of course, this kind of speaks to what we were saying about our time in New Orleans and what we learned there. I understand that for many people, especially I think from the younger generation, like 30 and under maybe, that can be hard. I mean, do you have any thoughts on how to move valuable connections into online or from online into real life? Because I think this is tough. I mean, even for us, you and Lisa are these two really dear friends, and we had to meet halfway across the world for you to connect. So I don't think this is a completely novel problem for people these days. What thoughts do you have on that?
I think we need to prioritize it because it's so important. But I do think I've noticed like a lot of the young people I work with, all of them, if not a lot of them, have real issues. A lot of their friendships are online. They don't quite know they're missing a huge amount of depth. And it takes a lot of effort to go to the trouble of trying to find physical, in real life friendships. And I think it's really important. I do think as well for parents who might be listening, or for even people who are just in the gender movement, we can feel a little bit separate from others because others don't understand the complexity of this movement. And we can start to feel a little bit isolated. And so let's say you might have gone to a choir or you might have gone somewhere and you kind of think these are almost not my people anymore because I'm so immersed in this world and they know nothing about this world. And I think, honestly, we have to just accept that and still maintain those friendships. I think you can end up just thinking, I just want to talk about gender and I don't want to talk. We've got to pull ourselves out of that. I think it's just something it's not madly healthy to just, and it's actually very healthy to talk to people and realize, oh God, it's not all about, there's lots of other issues that, it can be very healthy for us to talk to people who are not at all interested.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of our podcast. We work very hard to maintain high quality content for this show, and we're grateful to Rhyme and GenSpect for supporting us.
Rhyme, or Rethink Identity Medicine Ethics, is a non-profit organisation dedicated to improving long-term care for gender variant individuals. Visit rethinkime.org to learn more.
And GenSpect is an international alliance of parents and professional groups whose aim is to advocate for parents of gender-questioning children and young people.
If you'd like to become a patron, you'll have access to weekly transcripts and special Q&As, and you can join our listener community.
Now back to the show. Okay, that's a really big one. So I think a way to summarize that is develop relationships and in-person connections that are not about gender.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just because they aren't doesn't mean they're clueless. They have their wealth.
Right.
What are you thinking, and what do you think of the next one?
I think that piece of advice is really, really good. I'm still kind of thinking about that. Well, it makes me think about, maybe to add on to this, developing some hobbies. This kind of leads into self-care a little bit too, which we talked about at the beginning. Develop some interests or hobbies or activities that are just purely enriching or engaging or interesting or that bring you joy and excitement. I mean, we have to have that. Not everything can be a political battle every day, all day. We have to have pleasure and joy and engagement.
You're right. Like the way you talked about your weightlifting. You became really animated and it was like, oh, I see. And it's like, we need those things. We need them because otherwise we become bent out of shape. We become kind of obsessive and we lose our sense of pleasure. And we lose ourselves really. And so it's really important. So you can feel bored in the company of people who don't really get the complexity of where you're going all the time in your thoughts. And you can feel a little bit impatient. And I think it's very important that we don't dismiss the wealth that is out there just because we've stumbled into this extraordinarily complex phenomenon doesn't mean that there isn't huge wealth to be found elsewhere. And we can forget that.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, so let's look at the next one. Number 4. This is maybe my favorite one.
Okay.
Practice digital hygiene within your household. Digital hygiene. I only learned about that term recently. What is digital hygiene?
Well, in my world, it's kind of having...
Is it when you clean your phone with a little alcohol wipe?
Well, I'd be a disaster at that if it is. It is having a healthy attitude to tech in your household. So, for example, maybe no tech in the kitchen. maybe no tech after 11 o'clock at night, which I failed because I'm ending up chatting with you on WhatsApp. But different things. So let's say the kids might always have to take their phones out or all their devices out at a certain time at night. That's digital hygiene. It's like, okay, when snack foods came in the 70s, and that's when they did come in, we kind of celebrated with loads of snack foods and we all ate convenience foods. And then by the 80s, there was a kind of growing awareness that this wasn't the healthiest. And then there became a kind of awareness of, watch your snacks, not good for you. And we started becoming snack aware. We started becoming kind of more aware of that. And it's the same, like the digital world landed, we exploded, we fell all over it. And now here we are a good few years in going, okay, we actually need to put some serious structure around this, or we'll just be half online and half offline all day. I've got an awful habit, and my husband absolutely loathes it, and he's right, which is half watching telly and half.
Oh, yeah.
I am that person, and I've started a lot, and I really recommend it. I leave my phone upstairs. Because if I bring it down, I'll be half online and I'll be half watching telly. And he's like, it's so annoying. You're half talking, you're half online, you're half watching. It's a joy.
I have the same thing. I mean, I found myself like, if there's a podcast on, even though I might be very interested in listening, I'll just kind of pull out my phone and look through my messages. And then obviously I'm not doing justice to either task. So
frightening. It's frightening.
It's frightening. Yeah. And just kind of goes to show our level of stimulation is always upping the ante. Like I remember, my dad telling me about how like back in Egypt when they were kids, they would all sit around the radio and listen to like radio programs, and they were like over the moon with excitement for like this radio show or whatever. But now it's like we can have a TV blasting one place, a podcast going another place, we're texting somewhere, our computers are open. Like, whoa, we really need to slow it down because we can't even handle it. We can't even process it.
We feel it. So, we feel addled. We feel tense. You know what I mean? And that podcast, which you're really enjoying, and you start scrolling. I do it myself, and you've kind of ruined both on yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I do this all the time. You didn't even know you were doing it until
and then
you
I have to stop the podcast and rewind it so that I can get back into it. But then your train of thought has been destroyed.
And have a moment of self-loathing thinking, what the hell am I at? It's all perfect.
So there's that self-talk, right? Watch your self-talk when you're beating yourself up for your digital hygiene. No, but I mean, to make this concrete, so something that I want to start doing, like really, really want to start doing. Today was day one, okay? So like you gotta encourage me.
You, yeah.
Rather than waking up, making coffee, and immediately checking my WhatsApp, which is usually like a long scroll of messages between us.
And especially because I get up first because I'm in Ireland, but Lisa frankly gets up maybe an hour later, even though she's 5 hours ahead of me. But she's in Philadelphia, so she gets up next. So we have plenty of messages, and then Sasha comes in. Hello!
With my like million thoughts. So what I would like to do is actually give myself some space in the morning before I actually open any technology. Just to have it be, have my coffee, do my reading, do whatever I need to do before I dive into problem-solving mode, because your mind gets into a certain mode the second you are corresponding, and it's wonderful. But it also something funny about the technology is that you can't really compartmentalize what you want to attend to. So if you open your phone and I have all my notifications off, so that's good. But if I go to like my WhatsApp and then I go to my email and then I go to Twitter, you're forced to engage with a variety of topics or tasks that maybe you weren't oriented towards. Maybe all you wanted to do is like say hello to somebody, but then you get sucked in.
That's part of the digital hygiene. Many of us have a triangle, and sometimes it's a quadrangle or whatever the word is, because you go from Twitter over to email, over to maybe Mumsnet and over to Facebook, then back up to Twitter, over to email, and you do this loop.
Yes.
And you have your loop. And you go around and around the loop. It's frightening how many times you can actually go around back onto Twitter to check over to this.
What's in your loop?
Mine would be Twitter. Flick onto Mumsnet, because I'm very fond of Mumsnet. And obviously, definitely over to WhatsApp. And more and more emails are work. So less and less am I checking my emails on my phone. And I'm just thinking, I can't attend to that, so it has to be on the computer, so I'm not allowed. So yeah, I think my loop, honestly, Facebook really isn't in my loop. I'd say it's Twitter, Mumsnet, WhatsApp, Twitter, Mumsnet, WhatsApp. The odd flick onto Facebook and get a bit annoyed and back onto Twitter, Mumsnet, WhatsApp. It's a joy. But you know what I'm going to do to kind of follow your lead? I'm going to do it on the other side of the day. I am a big reader. And since I've got immersed in this, especially since COVID, this online world, I've noticed that I'm reading online in bed instead of reading my book. And my book in my bed is my favourite time of the day. Yeah. I'm going to get that away, because the amount of times I finally put down my phone, pick up my book, and I think, oh, I should have done this ages ago.
Me too.
Really?
I get it. Yeah, I read in the mornings, and it's like, if I allow phone work to creep too much into my like morning reading time, once I finally do get to my book, I'm like, why do I only have 5 minutes to read or whatever. And then
I think I'm knackered. I don't have the energy. And I actually, this is the lovely bit. Mm-hmm. It's a different reading. When you're reading on your phone, your shoulders are tense, your body is crouched, you're kind of tensed over it. When you're reading your book, you're in a different stance. You're actually in a different physicality, which is coming to the next point. Would you like to read it out?
Okay.
You put this in. It's hilarious.
I added this one
because
it's very Sasha, isn't it?
It's a very Sasha, and it's exactly where I'm neglecting myself. Like I say, since September, I've been neglecting myself. So it's exactly where I'm not at. So I'm very pleased to put it in.
Okay. So number 5 is move your body and make it a habit you enjoy.
Yes.
So I think for some people, they think about, I want to get healthy in the new year. And it feels like a chore that they have to do so that they can avoid some horrible doomed fate. But what I'm saying is find a way to move that is interesting, enjoyable, fun, that transports you to kind of a different mindset. It has to be something positive, and it should be something that you love and enjoy. And like you're walking. I mean, that sounds so nice. And I'm sure it's gorgeous where you live.
It's beautiful. And I have a set walk, and it's just gorgeous, and it's really pleasant. And I put on a podcast, and I'm in my element. Or else I'll go out with my friend. It's one or the other. And it's just so pleasant. Yeah. And I've lost it, and I'm getting it back. God, I need to do. What's yours?
Nice.
What's your...
Well, I mean, I also dance. And so since moving to Arizona, dance has been on the back burner for some years, as one might imagine. But I think for me, like, finding a way to make dance a more regular part of my life... I love the gym. I love lifting weights. I love going for walks. We actually happen to live literally on a beautiful park that stretches many, many blocks, and it's full of little lakes and basketball courts and skate parks. I mean, it's a beautiful place. So with the weather here being so nice, going for walks is something I really enjoy doing. So so we'll both be walking more in 2022.
Oh, wait till you see. It'll be fab.
Oh, well, when I come visit you one of these days, we'll definitely check it out.
I'm coming with my kiddos to you, so
yes, that would be amazing. Okay, so let's look at number 6.
This is my
one
favorite.
From you. Tell me.
This is my favorite. Seek comfort in the arts, literature, and music. I think it's not used enough in therapeutic world. I think it's the most underestimated, effective, and powerful therapeutic tool you can have. You can, if you listen to a piece of music that transports you, you actually start to think maybe we are beyond. Maybe there is something beyond, because music doesn't make sense. It seems to reach a part of us that is very untouchable. And the same with poetry. If you're feeling sad and if you read the right poem, a calmness and a kind of a moving, real depth of there's a universality to deep, tremendous pain. And when you realize, oh my God, others have been here too. And they've been good, kind people, and terrible things have happened to them. And it's something consoling about that. And the same with books. There's a brilliant book, Brideshead Revisited. I don't know why I just suddenly thought, I know why I thought of it, because it was a real for me, a real game changer in depth of my understanding of life. And it's a beautiful book. And I remember a description of a mental pain, and the guy says it was a bruise upon a bruise. And I just thought, oh, just the pain of that. He knew the pain, he had the pain, and more pain came. And he said with no hope that it would ever improve. And it was so moving. I remember reading it and just realizing that people many years ago have lived through lives and they've had serious, serious challenges. And life goes on and there's still beauty to be found. And I think it's underestimated and it's incredibly important, you know?
Yeah. I think that kind of transcendent universality is very, very important, especially for those of us who, again, are kind of down a rabbit hole that's so particular and so context dependent and so
cerebral,
an expression of our particular moment in time. And yes, totally cerebral. Getting lost in a piece of music or even being transported by a beautiful book. And it could be something that reflects pain or just something that transports you to really beautiful fantasy as well. I mean, I think being able to disconnect can be just as important as feeling like your pain is seen or reflected somewhere.
And not all reading, because I know a lot of my reading had become very helpful. And sometimes reading can just be literally escape from your world. Just go to bed, have a bath, read something that brings you off in a boat somewhere else and let you enter that world, you know?
You know, it's funny because when we were in New Orleans, Lisa has been talking about this Cormoran Strike series by J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, Lisa, I tend to read so many like kind of sociology books and just like commentary books. And I really don't read a lot of books just for pleasure. And I have been reading this series and it's so wonderful. And of course there are issues that are relevant that J.K. Rowling is writing about that reminds me of my work and of gender and of all these kind of contemporary kind of social issues.
J.K. Rowling knows her gender.
She's an amazing writer. Yeah. And it's just really nice to be excited to pick up the book and read, you know, like, oh, I can't wait to find out what happens next. Yeah. And we're watching Succession, which you have to watch.
It's unbelievable.
Anybody who's listening, if you're watching Succession, just like comment somewhere because I heard about Succession from like 3 people that I really, really trust. And by the 3rd person, I was like, fine, we have to watch it.
Yeah, I've got to watch it.
So I've got to watch it. It may not be literature or like some great novel, but it's... you know, transporting yourself just in a positive, interesting way.
I tell you, a funny novel that I'd recommend. It came out a couple of years ago. Nobody really commented on it, even though he's a very well-known writer in the UK and Ireland. Ben Elton, he's a comedian. And he wrote a book called Identity Crisis. And it's all about the gender issue, but it's comedy. It's very funny. It's very, very funny. And I'd really recommend it. And it's satirical, very.
Cool.
I won't give it away, but really good read. Lovely bit of escapism, very funny, and couldn't recommend it more. Really funny, really good.
Oh, cool. We'll include that in the notes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we better motor on through where are we?
Let's do. Number 7.
Seek flexible thinking and note rigid thinking. Beware of catastrophizing. Beware of black and white thinking. Woohoo.
So this is a very CBT kind of move here, which I actually really love this because it's so important to become aware of these traps and these biases that we all can fall into, especially when we're talking about heated, controversial, intense political and personal issues. So we have to be mindful of this because we're all susceptible to falling prey to these kind of thinking errors.
Yeah, it's really true. Catastrophizing in the middle of the night about how everything is going to go horrendously bad is a real issue. You know what I mean? There's a great line from Homer Simpson in The Simpsons saying, "That's a problem for the future, Homer."
I love that.
And I really think, you know, you'll cross that bridge when you come to it. There's no point in meeting the devil halfway. I could throw you 100 phrases around this and they all say, watch out for that. Watch out for that. You don't know where you'll be, and you don't know what will be happening. And you're just basically, you're putting your finger in a wound and you're hurting yourself. Is what you're doing. And it's 4 a.m. and you're the loneliest person in the world, and your mind is racing. It's just something to be very, very wary of. Catastrophizing with gender is something that doesn't massively help. And it's all about get into the reality and watch your rigid thinking, because we can be so rigid. And it's there is a lot of rigid thinking in this actual movement, you know what I mean? Because there is rigidity with, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, and it's flexibility is a real hallmark of healthy thinking. And rigid thinking is something that we have to be wary of, and we can fall into rigid thinking very much. We think, you can very much respond to rigidity with rigidity, and it's difficult not to, but it's better if we can.
Yeah. So what's coming to my mind is that when you are trying to make some sort of cultural or political change, people who are writing about the topic or engaged in the topic have to play up a certain kind of rigidity to get the point across. So catastrophizing is a pretty common thing journalists have to do, which journalists probably should be reporting in a very neutral manner. But the truth is that I believe there's literally a catastrophe happening when it comes to childhood transition. And also, we have to hold space for the fact that there's hope, and there's a possibility, and there's always opportunity, and things don't have to be always framed as a life or death situation. And I think, you're so right about this being a hallmark of well-being, like having psychological flexibility. And to be honest, for somebody like myself or you who have been in this work now for more than 5 years or something, I have watched certain individuals who are detransitioners and their evolution and their growth. And I think people who are doing well and are able to heal, not that they will ever be fully healed, or they will ever look back and say, actually, I don't have anger at the medical industry, or I don't have anger at my therapist. But people who are doing well have to develop some sort of resilience and flexibility, or else they get stuck in a complete victim role forever. And no matter how much blame the doctors and the industry deserves, which I think they do, and I've said this for 6 solid years now, that's all I've said. But on the individual level, when a person is trying to heal from being wronged, they have to have some sort of resilience and flexibility. And I think as a movement, all of the people who are here listening to us for the same reasons that they're concerned about this rush to medicalize, we have to be mindful not to get too stuck in a very rigid black or white way of thinking and making enemies out of people who maybe are our allies and things like that. So I think this kind of flexibility is super important, and I'm really glad that you brought this up.
Yeah, couldn't say it better myself. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it's not easy. It's not easy to stay flexible. Kind of linking with that is number 8, which is focus on this moment. Sometimes if you go to the hardest times in your life, and I remember once years ago, I was pregnant with my second child, and my first child was 1, which was, full on. And my husband got very, very sick. He ended up in hospital for months, and he was in a coma. Yeah. And I was being told that he was going to come out in a wheelchair. And our lives were falling apart, literally, you know what I mean? And it was so intense. And I didn't have my best friend because he was in a coma. And I remember at the time, if I was to wave a magic, my point is, this was a properly hard time. This was properly. And it was 2009, so it was the crash. So, and he was a builder, so his business was going to pieces and stuff. Everything was happening. And if I was to have a magic wand and go back and say one thing I wish I had done, was I kept on imagining in the future what it was going to be like. He'd be in a wheelchair and we'd have to move and we wouldn't have a house. And oh my God, I was going to have 2 kids and how was I going to cope? And off I went over there when actually, honestly, today's was hard enough. I didn't need to land all of that.
Yeah.
And if I could have just stayed in the moment, the day to day, if it could just don't go off into that future, because I didn't know. I didn't know what was going to happen. It turned out, I always forget to tell the end of this story. It turned out fine. He came out of hospital. He was very good. He was very brave. He was very courageous. He really did his work to get his physio, and he walks and he's fine, and it's a distant memory now. Yeah. It did leave a mark, but it's been an amazing recovery. Yeah, but if looking back at that terrible time, and I've had other times, and I always went to the despair. I went to the future and I went to the despair, and that's what I'm urging people, having been there in different. I won't go to other stories, but there's many of them in my life, and I just think, I didn't need to add that onto me. You know, it was bad enough. So living in the moment, I think, is so important.
Yeah. Taking things kind of one day at a time, dealing with what's in front of you rather than what's 10 miles ahead.
Yeah.
And, you know, this also means enjoying the precious moments that you have where everything's okay. I mean, if you are a parent and you're worried about your child, I would also guess that there are many, many moments throughout your week where you're sitting on the couch, you know, watching a movie together, or you're, you know, chatting about something over dinner. Enjoy those moments and relish in them, because that is also part of the way you improve relationships and stay engaged in your life, is by staying present in the moment. So I think that's a good one.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah. So number 9 is similar, finding pleasure in little things. So what was on your mind when you were thinking about this one, Stella?
My one is, for anybody who knows me would say is unsurprising, was centered on putting on new sheets on the bed and getting into bed. It's a real pleasure for me. I just love my bed.
Being in bed has come up a lot during this conversation.
I will admit
bed
it.
mad. I love bed mad.
But yeah, you know that gorgeous feeling of the sheets, the new sheets. It's a pleasure. It's just one of those gorgeous pleasures. And a really, really nice cup of tea at the right moment. Just taking the pleasure of it. A shower, I always think, easy, always accessible. You could have a shower today and you can walk in and you could be thinking about what you're going to do today, and you could be vigorously washing yourself, and you could be and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to say that to him, and you could get out and dry yourself. Or you could go in and you could revel in the water, the gorgeousness, the sensuality, the hair, the suds, the beautifulness of a shower. We have that access to it every single day. And we wreck it because we're thinking, and then I'm going to do this. Do you know what I mean? It's extraordinary.
It's so amazing you say that, because that was exactly what I was thinking of. I mean, it's something that most of us hopefully do every day. And it can be a really nice kind of total escape little moment in your day. If you have whatever soap you have in there that smells really enjoyable, and like, if it's a cold day and you get the water a little extra hot, like, it's really a very luxurious, accessible thing. So I think that's a really good example. And I think for me, I adore food and cooking. And sometimes when it's time for dinner, you know, if I'm in the wrong mindset, it kind of feels like a chore that, I just have to think about. But there are other times when I'm really excited about just taking the time to make something really good and smelling it, and just every step of the recipe or the process. And there's a way that we can enjoy these kind of little everyday moments that we tend to take for granted, or we kind of glaze over them while thinking about other things.
And I know it's very easy because we're not going through the most awful time, and it could be very, I know listeners could say this is, you know, almost insensitive. I can't enjoy anything. It's just all so horrible. And I would say it's kind of vital that you take some enjoyment from some things. It's kind of vital that you give it to your soul. Almost needs it, so that you can not be weakened and crippled by this. You've kind of got to sometimes just say, I'm just going to enjoy this sandwich. I'm just going to eat this little piece of food, and I'm just going to just actually listen to the radio and just blank, just enjoy this moment because I have to. Because it's almost like you need sleep. You need a little bit of pleasure, because it's like people get crushed. You can see the joylessness has just got in. It's just got in, and they're holding tighter and tighter and tighter to their solution. And it's like, honestly, in the gentlest possible way, you will be very difficult to find a solution when you're in that rigid, tight, joyless space. And so the only thing you can do is soften your jaw, soften your shoulders, soften your body, and just seek a little bit, even for 10 seconds, a little bit of joy, because it's I think it's actually critical.
Yeah, it's almost like a palate cleanser or something that you need. And I've heard Lisa Marciano talk a lot about the importance, and I know she got this from somewhere else, so I don't mean to misattribute where this idea comes from, but this idea of enjoying your children.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's like most parents love their kids and want the best for their kids and worry about their kids. But there's this other thing that happens when you genuinely enjoy your children. And she talks about, if your child walks in the room and you glance and your eyes just light up and a smile comes over your face, your child will feel enjoyed and welcomed and wanted. And so, this is not at all unrelated to what we're talking about. If you've lost the ability to enjoy or have joy from other little things in your life, it's going to be very difficult to find joy in your child, especially when they're doing things that scare you or drive you crazy or get under your skin. So you cannot expect to abandon the entire project of joy and pleasure and still find a way to parent your child in a loving, healthy manner. So I think these things are connected.
They are, very much so. And some sort of, if at all possible, if you happen to have a sense of fun about you, it can really retrieve. It can retrieve so much. It can really build bridges, that if you both can have a shared sense of humour in a funny kind of incident with the traffic warden or somebody's face, it can lighten. It can be a shared moment where you haven't connected in 6 months, and you both, your eyes meet over this, and it can actually make a difference. So there is a necessity for it. I would be really quite serious about it. And you'll be the better for it for every reason. So drum roll, I think we're on the last one, are we?
Number 10.
Go on.
Seek to understand the needs behind ROGD. What is driving this gender distress? So I think this is an invitation to get our minds out of gender and think big picture. Let's try to understand what's really going on. As I always say, gender comes in the picture and clouds everybody's ability to see what's happening. So I really think this is very, very good advice, very important. Can you say more about your thoughts on this?
It's like every mental health, and I think we as an industry maybe haven't communicated this maybe sufficiently. So like when an alcoholic becomes an alcoholic, it wasn't that they started an alcoholic. Probably they started maybe socially anxious, maybe depressed, maybe anything. Maybe they needed alcohol to that was the solution to the mental distress that they had, and then they developed habituation and addiction. The very same for other things, that on some level it felt like the solution. So gender feels like the solution, and therefore there was a problem. Right. But what is the problem? Because focusing on that solution, which is gender, is missing the problem. And figure out the problem. And very often the problem might be social anxiety, might be loneliness, isolation, trauma, perfectionism, all of those. And the sooner you figure out the problem, the sooner you're less lost and you're less kind of taken in by the decoy of gender.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so important there.
And that can help parents, who may be listening, to strategize about next year. If your child is feeling really lonely and isolated, and gender has become this thing, rather than trying to focus so much on the gender, help connect them with people in real life. Let's see if there's like a local club that they can join that has to do with drawing or skateboarding or whatever. I mean, finding ways to address those needs doesn't have to be something that is a really big conflict. I mean, sometimes parents think, well, first we have to resolve the gender issue and then we'll work on these other things. And I say, no, it's precisely the opposite. Gender may just be this awkward thing that nobody knows how to address for maybe several years in your family, or maybe longer, or maybe less, right? But first things first, you do have to try and figure out what the underlying needs are so you can try to meet those. And oftentimes, in my experience, when those needs are being met, tension kind of loosens up a little bit about the gender.
And in my experience, when the parents have no idea about what the needs are, there's a communication issue that people could really benefit from dealing with. So then you'd say, okay, first of all, there's a problem and I don't know what it is. Before that, there's a problem with communication, which I need to first of all deal with. And when we get through the communication problem, we will unearth what the actual problem is. And you've gone a completely different direction rather than reading studies by the eminent Ken Zucker and things like that. And he is brilliant. But to me, it's kind of sending you off on the wrong
It's like a wild
track.
Goose chase,
It
as they
is.
say, right?
It feels like one. It really does. And it's like, I wouldn't go and be an expert in gender. I'd go and be an expert. You do need to know a certain level because you cannot allow the child to have more authority than you have. You need to be able to hold your own. But when you've got to the point where you do know as much as them and a good deal more, then you need to say, actually, I need to be the equivalent about communication. I need to be the equivalent about emotional intelligence or insight or expanding the life or learning to find joy or being a role model or digital hygiene. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think it's really important, and I'm glad we finished on that one. It's funny, out of the 10 resolutions, and this is very much around gender, one of them is focused on gender, and I think appropriately, 9 of them are the other stuff that's so important.
Oh my gosh. I think that's really telling. And this is a great kind of overall symbol for what we are trying to communicate. So well done to us. And I'm going to include some links in our notes that kind of relate to some of the things we discussed. And we hope that everybody is excited about our Pioneer series, which we're really thrilled about. So please keep your eye out for that. That will be out next week in the year 2022.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us this week on Gender, A Wider Lens. This podcast is sponsored by Rhyme and GenSpect, and listener support means a lot to us. The best way to help is to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
Follow us on social media, and if you'd like to become a patron, you'll have access to weekly transcripts of the show, special Q&As, and you can join our listener community. Just go to our Linktree. That's linktr.ee/widerlenspod.
Our discussions are for educational purposes only and are not intended as a substitute for mental health services.